Hello everybody, my name is Karryshh and welcome back to another recap video. This time it's not a Japanese horror movie, it's a Japanese horror series. It's called Tsukisoi, meaning possessed. It had total of 9 different stories that revolves around one single girl who has the ability to see ghosts. In today's video, I will cover 5 of those stories and the rest will be uploaded later. And it's one of the most scary TV series from Japan. So now, if you're new to my channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. It is free for you and it is something that helps me out a lot. Fun fact, I'm saving every penny from this channel to support my studies. Anyway, sit back and relax as I recap Tsukisoi. So the first story is called A Sinister Man and it starts with a guy standing weirdly on the stairs, completely unnoticed by everyone else. Then we meet a woman named Megumi who is a mother at a train station with her 2 kids. Out of nowhere, her older son, Shota, lets go of her hand and runs off. She quickly chases him down and stops him, but that's when her eyes land on something on the stairs. And here's the thing, Megumi has the ability to see spirits, and that's why she immediately senses something evil. Trying to shake it off, she takes Shota back to the platform to wait for the train. But just as the train is about to arrive, they see a female office worker standing there, completely emotionless. Out of nowhere, she jumps onto the tracks. Obviously, Megumi immediately covers her son's eyes, but what shocks her isn't just the woman's unalivement, it's the fact that she sees a man with an eerie smile before that office worker who jumped with her. Megumi was frozen in fear as the chaos unfolds and another woman nearby starts screaming. Now that night, after putting their kids to bed, Megumi and her husband talk about what happened. Her husband's name's Jun and he brushes it off, telling her to forget about it, but she can't get the creepy face out of her head. When they do some digging, the news only reports about the woman's death. There's no mention of the man at all. And then she feels like he's standing right there in their bedroom. Now the story jumps forward a few years. Megumi comes at a cafe to meet a woman named Keiko who came to her for a fortune reading. Yep, Megumi is a fortune teller now. Now as she reads Keiko, she tells her that her husband is actually a very sensitive man, even if he tries to act strong. She mentions a few more things about him, but then Keiko pulls out a photo, one that was taken recently, and ever since that picture was taken, she says that her husband was completely changed. Megumi takes one look at the photo and her hands go cold. The photo slips from her grip because there in the background of the picture, it was that same evil man. Megumi immediately understands that this was the same entity that pushed that woman in front of the train, and now it's inside Keiko's house. To investigate further, Megumi goes to Keiko's house, and when Keiko's husband comes home from work, his face looks completely drained. He goes straight to his room and Keiko tells Megumi that he hasn't smiled in a long time. A little later, he comes out to grab something from the fridge, but the second he opens it, he freezes in terror. His eyes are locked on one of the rooms because he was seeing him. Megumi immediately picks up on this and gets up to check the room, and sure enough, she sees him too, clear as day. But the moment she turns on the light, he vanishes. Now they all sit down and talk, and Keiko's husband finally opens up about something. A while back, on his way home from work, he passed by a crime scene. The police were investigating, and out of curiosity, he took a photo of the scene, but right after, he saw the man. The worst part was that the man wouldn't show up in the picture. It freaked him out and he ran home, but ever since that night, the entity has been following him, and the body at that crime scene, there's a high chance that this thing was responsible for that too. Hearing this, Megumi goes pale and she tells him that the last time she encountered this evil spirit, she learned that once it makes eye contact with someone, it latches onto him. But before she can explain further, Keiko's husband suddenly lowers his head and then out of nowhere, he starts laughing. The room falls silent and then in a disturbingly unnatural voice, he asks Megumi, "Do you want to die?" That's when Megumi realizes what's really happening. This entity doesn't just haunt people, it slowly pushes them into depression, breaking them down until they take their own lives. Now, without wasting time, Megumi calls in an exorcist the next day. He blesses the house and performs a ritual to banish the spirit. And the moment the exorcism is over, Keiko's husband is completely back to normal. His mood is lighter, and for the first time in a long while, he smiles and speaks like himself again. Relieved, the three of them go out to celebrate. But back at the train station, the man appears again, now standing behind another office worker, ready to claim its next victim. And just like that, the story ends. The second story begins, and its name is House on the Hill. This takes place when Megumi was pregnant with her second child. Since their family was growing, Megumi and Jun were looking for a new house. They found one that was perfect for two kids, but soon realized it was way out of their budget. So they asked their real estate agent to show them something more affordable. The agent told them that there was only one house within their budget, located on a beautiful hill, and he was confident that they'd like it. On the way there, Megumi suddenly saw a little girl on the road and immediately asked Jun to stop the car. But when they got out, the girl was nowhere to be seen. The agent looked confused, but Jun understood that Megumi had just seen a ghost again. Anyway, when they arrived at the house, Megumi got an eerie feeling even before stepping inside. Then, she saw the same little girl in the garden, but Jun couldn't see her. Megumi took him to check, but they found nothing, and Jun told her that she was just overthinking it. Now inside the house was actually really nice, which made Jun question why such a great house was selling for so cheap. When he asked the agent, the guy avoided to give a real answer. Meanwhile, Megumi wandered around and soon started feeling sick, like the house was draining her energy. Then she opened a closet and was shocked. Inside, the entire closet was covered in talisman. That's when she knew something was definitely wrong. And before she can say anything, she heard a noise coming from another part of the house. She went to check and found a storage area completely dark inside. Soon, Jun walked in excited and saying that they should buy this house, but Megumi pointed out the storage space and he decided to check it out. He jumps inside and he found a talisman and brought it out. Megumi immediately scolded him and made him put it back because she was convinced that this house is not safe. Now, as the couple continued looking around, Megumi finally realized why the house was so cheap. It was actually right next to a huge cemetery, and in that moment, she saw the little girl again right by the cemetery. She quickly pointed her out to Jun, but the girl disappeared before he could see her. At that point, Megumi wasn't staying another second. She started heading back to the car, but suddenly, the little girl appeared in front of her, sitting on the ground. Megumi tried talking to her, but in an instant, the girl's face twisted into evil and she lunged at Megumi, and Megumi blacked out from fear. Jun found her unconscious and brought her back home, but that night Megumi started researching about that property and discovered that years ago a fire had burned down the entire place. Then a new house was later built on the land, but according to online records, when the fire happened, the house was supposed to be empty. No one had died in it. This doesn't make any sense. If the house was empty, how did the fire even start? Megumi then came to a chilling conclusion. The spirits from the cemetery must have been responsible for the fire. The land itself was haunted, and that's why they needed to stay far away from it. Now begins the third story, The Stairs. This takes place when Megumi's son Shota had grown a little older. That day, Megumi had taken Shota to visit her mother Mitsuko. While they were there, Megumi showed Shota an old childhood album where we see pictures of Megumi's sister Nozomi and their pet cat from back in the day. Then Mitsuko enters and Shota excitedly starts talking to his grandmother. While chatting, Mitsuko tells Shota how Megumi used to be terrified of everything as a child and she used to refuse to go to the bathroom alone. Megumi believes something was haunting her and part of her fear comes from an old story. Actually, you see, years ago, a woman had jumped into a well near their house and taken her own life. However, now Megumi quickly interrupts her mother and she doesn't want Shota to hear such a scary story. Now, after hearing this brings back Megumi's childhood memories and we shift back in the past where we see little Megumi asleep in the upstairs bedroom with Nozomi. Suddenly, Megumi hears sound of water dripping and she wakes up. She needed to use the bathroom but she was too scared to go alone, so she wakes up Nozomi too. Nozomi was annoyed and didn't want to go, but Megumi insisted and took her anyway. Now, as they start walking down the dimly lit eerie staircase, Megumi suddenly sees the ghostly figure of a woman stand in the kitchen, and she was holding a baby in her arms. Megumi freezes in terror, but as soon as she turns on the light, the spirit vanishes. However, where the ghost had been standing, the floor is now wet. It becomes clear that Nozomi can see ghosts, which is why she doesn't seem scared at all. Anyway, after this, when Megumi was inside the bathroom, she heard the sound of water dripping again. So she quickly runs out, only to find Nozomi asleep, sitting right outside the door. The two sisters then head back upstairs, but just as they reach the staircase, they stop. From inside their bedroom, they were hearing the unmistakable sound of footsteps moving around. But in the end, it turns out that it was just their cat. The next day, Nozomi complains to their mom that Megumi keeps waking her up every night. Their mom then scolds Megumi, but when Megumi explains that she saw a woman in the kitchen last night, Mitsuko gets scared and immediately shuts her down, telling her that she didn't see anything and not to overthink it. That evening, Megumi's grandparents come over, but when they were about to leave, Megumi clings to her grandmother and she starts begging to go with her because she doesn't want to stay in her house. However, just then, we see something shift in the background. We see the moving curtains, and it was because of that spirit. Now that night, Megumi is sleeping at her grandparents' house when she suddenly wakes up to the sound of dripping water again. As soon as she sits up, the evil spirit appears right in front of her holding its baby. Now before she can even process what just happened, Mitsuko storms in as she drags Megumi back home, and she also snaps at her parents, saying that she will never send her daughter there again. Now here's a theory. Mitsuko does this because at this point, she understands that whatever spirit is haunting their home is specifically following Megumi. So to protect her daughter, she keeps her close. Now back at home, Megumi sleeps next to Nozomi again, and when she wakes up in the middle of the night, she doesn't want to wake her sister this time. That's why she quickly runs to the bathroom by herself before anything creepy happens. But while inside, she starts hearing a baby crying from outside the door, and she slowly steps out, realizing the spirit was just right next to her watching her. She tries to ignore the spirit and heads toward the stairs, but the light there was flickering. Then suddenly, the woman's baby grabs her leg and Megumi screams and runs as fast as she can, hiding under her blanket. The next morning, after that terrifying night, Megumi's pet cat disappeared. Then later that day, her grandparents returned with a shaman who then performed a ritual near the well outside their house, the same well where the woman had taken her own life. Then, the shaman privately speaks with Mitsuko and gives her a talisman, saying that if they hang it in the house, the spirit won't bother Megumi anymore. And from that day on, Megumi never saw the spirit again. Now we return to the present, where Megumi is staring at the same talisman which is still hanging on the wall after all these years. She says goodbye to her mom and leaves for work, while Shota stays with his grandmother. But as she was leaving, Megumi notices that the talisman is coming loose. After all these years, curiosity gets the best of her, and she removes it to have a closer look. However, when she sees it, her blood runs cold, because behind the talisman, Mitsuko had repeatedly returned the words, "Forgive me." Megumi now looks at her mother and their eyes lock. In that moment, Megumi realizes the truth. The reason why her pet cat suddenly disappeared and never came back was that Mitsuko had sacrificed it to the spirit. The theory is that the woman who jumped into the well had been pregnant, but because she never got the chance to raise her child, her spirit latched onto Megumi, believing her to be its baby. That is why Mitsuko had to sacrifice the cat to satisfy the spirit, so it would leave Megumi alone. And with that, the story ends. The fourth story is called Not That One. It starts with a man named Ito who works at a funeral house. His job is to clean up the homes of deceased people. We also meet his colleague, Satoshi, who introduces a new employee, Megumi. She recently graduated and this is her first job. Megumi apologizes for being late on her first day, but Ito isn't impressed. After all, who shows up late on their first day of work? Still, they head out together to clean the home of an elderly woman who recently passed away. The house is a complete mess. Before going inside, Ito and Megumi put their hands together in a short prayer for the woman's soul. Then they step in and start working. The place is downright creepy. The TV is still on, stuck on a static screen, and there's no light anywhere. The stench of old diapers fills the airs, and from the state of the house, it was obvious that the old woman lived alone with no one to take care of her. As Megumi cleans, she hears a strange noise, like someone cutting into flesh. Following the sound, she ends up in front of a closet, and inside there was a small box. When she opens it, she nearly screams because she finds a rotting piece of flesh covered in worms. Then Ito rushes over to check, but all he finds in the box is a dried up umbilical cord. Anyway, brushing it off, they get back to work, but Megumi starts feeling uneasy. Something about the house doesn't feel right. She steps into the bathroom and nearly throws up because the place was absolutely disgusting, covered in feces. However, once again when Ito comes to check, Megumi is shocked. The bathroom is spotless, sparkling clean, like nothing was ever wrong with it. Later, as they finish packing up the trash, Megumi can't help but wonder what really happened to the old woman in this house. She finds the woman's bed, and below the bed, Ito discovers an old photograph. It's a picture of the woman when she was younger, holding her son when he was a child. It was clear from the photo how much she loved him, and probably the woman was obsessed with her son. That's why she had kept her umbilical cord all these years. Now, with their work done, Ito and Megumi say one last prayer before heading home. Now we follow Ito as he returned to his own place, and his house is completely disarray. His mother passed away long time ago, and just like the old woman, he has no one left to take care of him. His life was completely lonely and empty. Then the story jumps ahead 1 week and Megumi comes to work, realizing that Ito hasn't shown up for days. She starts getting worried about him and she tells Satoshi that they should check on Ito because she has a bad feeling. What if he had gotten a curse from that haunted house? Now Satoshi agrees to go, but he takes Megumi with him. In the evening, when they arrive at Ito's place, they hear strange noises coming from inside, and suddenly, Ito steps out, but he looks terrible, like a walking corpse. Ito asks him what's wrong, but before Megumi can answer, she notices something behind him, a dark shadow looming over Ito, and she immediately realized that something is attached to him. His skin was covered in rashes. Now here, Megumi secretly tells him to get out of there immediately because the place is cursed, but the moment she says it, the entity reacts. Out of nowhere, the spirit appears right behind Ito and grabs Megumi's hand. The second it touches her, she's thrown into a vision. When she opens her eyes, she finds herself sitting in a blood-soaked bathroom, cradled in the lap of that terrifying entity. The woman stares at her with an unsettling gaze and starts moving toward her in an eerie, unnatural way. Terrified, Megumi screams, and just like that, she snaps back to reality. Now the next day, Ito still doesn't show up for work and Megumi can't shake the feeling that something is seriously wrong. She decides to check the file of that old woman whose house they had cleaned. From the records, she learns that the woman was 67 years old and had been living alone cause her son abandoned her. He never even sent her money and eventually she died in grief. After her death, a random man had called for the house to be cleaned, most likely her son, but he never came forward because it feels like the son was actually happy after her mother's death. The report also said that the woman had died inside the bathroom and then it all made sense to Megumi. When the woman's spirit saw Ito, she latched onto him because he needed a mother and she needed a son. That's why when Megumi told Ito to run, the spirit didn't let him go. Instead, she scared Megumi away. Now just then, Ito calls the office. He apologizes to Megumi for his behavior, but while he was talking, Megumi Megumi was clearly hearing the voice of that woman in the background. What happened to Ito after this, no one knows. Maybe Megumi decided not to get too involved in a case that was already beyond saving. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments. The fifth story is called Tunnel, and it's about Megumi's sister Nozomi. This incident happened when Megumi and Nozomi were living together after college. One day, Nozomi was going on a trip with her boyfriend to a supposedly spiritual place. Megumi warned her not to do anything reckless that might bring something back with her, but Nozomi went anyway. Now we meet Nozomi's boyfriend Yosuke along with his friend Shirota and Shirota's girlfriend Amy. This whole trip was Shirota's idea, and there was already some weird tension between the four of them. Yosuke kept calling Nozomi his wife. Shirota had a total playboy vibe, and Amy knew it, but she was still dating him. On top of that, Amy seemed jealous of Nozomi and Yosuke's relationship, while Nozomi kept noticing Shirota's creepy stares, which she obviously didn't like. Anyway, they eventually head out to explore this haunted place, a cursed tunnel deep in the forest. Shirota mentioned that one of his friends had gone near this tunnel once and he mysteriously disappeared. This freaks Nozomi out, and since she had grown up with Megumi, so she knew she's not going to mess around with supernatural stuff. She refused to go anywhere near the tunnel, and Yosuke decided to stay with her in car, but Shirota and Amy went ahead, excited for their little adventure. Soon, the couple entered the tunnel, leaving Nozomi and Yosuke alone in the car, and Nozomi asked if it was true that Shirota's friend had disappeared. Yosuke denied it and explained that the guy had actually been in an accident and stopped speaking, meaning he didn't vanish out of thin air. But then, out of nowhere, they heard a girl laughing outside the car. Both of them freeze in fear, and suddenly, something heavy landed on the roof of their car. Terrified, they sat there trembling when Amy suddenly banged on the car door, screaming for help. She was shouting that something was chasing her, and they quickly pulled her inside. But she kept on screaming at Yosuke to drive, saying if they don't drive right now, they will all die. Obviously, this scares Yosuke as well, and he didn't wait for Shirota to arrive and drive him away. Now, after driving for a while, Yosuke suddenly slammed the brakes cause right in front of him was a cliff. If he had listened to Amy and blindly driven forward, they would have gone straight off the edge. Now, before anyone could process what was happening, Amy suddenly grabbed Nozomi's mouth, silencing her, because right outside the car, standing behind her, was an evil girl. Luckily, Nozomi spots a road and Yosuke immediately takes it, speeding back to the city. When they finally get home, Amy was shivering uncontrollably and she was repeating one thing over and over again, that she's freezing and that the place is too cold. Something was definitely wrong with her, but no one knew what to do. After a while, Yosuke leaves to go back to the forest and look for Shirota because he didn't want to abandon his friend. Nozomi stays behind with Amy and at some point she dozes off, but when she wakes up in the middle of the night, she sees Amy standing weirdly still. Amy doesn't respond when Nozomi talks to her and she just walks straight into the kitchen. And guess what? Amy never comes out. A little while later, Yosuke returns, having saved Shirota from the tunnel. As Yosuke and Nozomi try to calm Shirota down, he finally starts talking about what really happened in that cursed place. The scene shifts to earlier that night. At some point inside, Amy suddenly stops and just stares at Shirota, because actually see, she was mad at him. Now trying to lighten the mood, Shirota takes her picture, but then Amy asks if he's cheating on her. Shirota doesn't answer and just keeps walking ahead, and they eventually reach a fence. There, Amy tries to snatch Shirota's phone, probably to check his messages, and in that struggle, his phone slips and falls on the other side of the fence. Now when Shirota reaches through to grab it, the screen of the phone starts flickering, and at the same time, both of their flashlights begin to glitch, and then, just like that, Amy vanishes from behind him. Obviously, Shirota panics and starts searching for her, but then, out of nowhere, she appears again. Except she's not Amy anymore. Her head was jerking back and forth at an unnatural speed, and before Shirota can do anything, he blacks out. The next thing he remembers is waking up outside with Yosuke dragging him back home. Back in the present, Nozomi tells them that Amy had gone into the kitchen, but when they check, she's not there. Amy is gone. The next day, Nozomi tells Megumi everything. When Megumi sees the picture Shirota took inside the tunnel, her face goes pale. That's when she realizes it. The curse didn't just affect Amy. The truth was, Amy had already died in that tunnel. The thing that came back with him, the thing that sat in the car and entered their house, it wasn't Amy. It was actually her spirit. That's why she kept saying she was cold. Now, it took Amy a while to understand that she was already dead. But once she did, her soul quietly left for wherever spirits are supposed to go. And just like that, the story ends. So this was the recap video on the series Tsukisoi, and I hope you have liked this. There are 4 more episodes and I will cover them later. If you have liked this video, then please subscribe the channel and give this video a thumbs up. I really need your support to grow further. If you want to watch the series, there's a link to my Telegram channel in the description box. If that link does not work, just go to Telegram and put my channel's name in the search bar. How and when you can find it on Telegram will be revealed on channel, so go join that. I'm mostly active on Insta, so you can follow me there as well and look into my other channels where we discuss about the mysteries of the world. All the links are in the description box. For now, I see you all in the next one. Till then, stay awake, because they always see you.